Welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast, your home for all things Chelsea FC. Nick, Dan, and myself cover all the match reviews from the latest Chelsea matches. We cover the team news and even throw you some exclusive interviews. Thank you already for being an awesome listener. And you know what? Let's jump right in.
Welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. It is not Brandon behind the mic right now. It is Dan. We are absent of Brandon as he is doing something today, which makes us sad. But you know what? We're going to talk about a Chelsea win, so that makes us and probably you very, very happy. We do have the wonderful Nicholas Verlaney, who somehow, even though he is traveling, managed to get himself onto the pod, unlike some other individuals we know. Nick, where were you today?
I am in Austin, Texas. Took in the match this morning with the Austin Blues, who were absolutely fantastic hosts. If you were around, on a Chelsea weekend with the Austin Blues, you will have a great time. Highly recommended. Thank you guys for the beautiful swag. They have one of the best pin scarf combinations I've seen out there. So, just overall a great weekend. Austin, Texas is a great town. And, because I'm a warrior, #no off days, Mike.
Yeah. And if you hear snoring coming from me, that's because it was a 4 a.m. match that Dan and I got to watch this weekend. And rather than get some sleep afterwards, I caught some of the North London derby. Dan, how are you feeling?
Well, that was smart. I stayed up and watched the Wilder-Fury fight and then kind of just parlayed that into catching up on The Good Place and then doing some chores around the house and then was making sure I stayed up for the lineups to come out so we could start the Twitter engagement. So, it's going to be nap time after this podcast. But you know what? We're going to push through it. And how could we not do a West London derby episode by making sure that we bring in a phenomenal guest? We have a wonderful returning guest to the podcast, Liam Toomey, Chelsea correspondent for ESPN. Welcome back to the show, Liam.
Pleasure to be back, guys. Thanks for having me.
We wouldn't have it any other way. So we are going to go in. We're going to do a couple of wonderful pieces here. Nick, since I'm taking the hot seat right now as the host, I'd love you to go through those amazing iTunes reviews that we got this week. We got a bunch.
That's right, and a lot with questions attached because Dan's been seeding that idea for a couple of weeks now. So let's do some rapid fire. I will throw the questions to one of you three, and we'll get some answers. So from Dortmund fan 3, what about Pulisic to Chelsea? And do we, as a podcast, play FIFA? Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yes, please, as an American. And I do play FIFA.
What is your gamer tag, Mike?
Monkey Peach.
That's really embarrassing for everybody. Thank you for that. I'm at Red Card Envy, NV being Nick Verlaney. There you go. Dan, what's your gamer tag?
I play on PlayStation, so it's Agent Dormer on the PlayStation Network.
Loser. Okay. Cheese and Save Crackers asking what we're going to do, when we're going to do a third weekly episode. Dan, thoughts?
Well, we will have another episode this week after we play Wolves, so you have your wish granted. And it will probably not be a regular occurrence, but at least this week it's going to happen.
Never enough content for people. That is good to hear. From Killy42, great format, knowledgeable host, except Nick, clever banter. I shouldn't have read that out loud. Cameron Forstrom found us in the summer, was at the Cardiff match in September. That's awesome. Good for you. Bum of Sleep. We keep him company on his Monday morning commute. That's awesome. Gracho3 and TKP45 round out the list, Dan. All impressive. Glad we got a couple of questions in there. And to Killy42, that's not cool, man.
That may have been added by me.
What? What?
That was not in the actual review.
What?
That was a.
I co-sign.
You apologize to Killy42 right now. You apologize.
They talk about knowledgeable hosts and clever banter, and I had to provide the clever banter, and I assumed you would realize the ruse and be the knowledgeable host that you are, and we'll just blame it on travel or something. Maybe too much barbecue. It's got to the head. Anyway, we also have 2 new Patreons this week, Howell Horner and Chuki Obio. And thank you guys for joining the Patreon. You can go onto Patreon, let's search for London is Blue Podcast, join in the action there. We are getting very, very close to kind of working on some new swag that we're going to push out as a reward option we're very excited about. We did have one off-topic Patreon question that was near and dear, I think, to Mike's heart. As a Cincinnati Bengals fan, our friend Tom Weber was asking about, a little off topic, was asking about Baker Mayfield and what we thought and if he's the real deal for Cleveland. I figured after you had a chance to witness the truth of Baker Mayfield against your Bengals last weekend, that you'd be able to give a great assessment, Mike.
You know, I actually didn't watch the game. I have not followed the NFL much this season. But I did see the highlights, and, most people are the truth against the Bengals. So let's see. I mean, I just see him being added to that long, long list of Browns quarterbacks. So, you got us this time.
Yeah, he looked great. He looks very great, and he is carrying me to fantasy football victory this season in my work league. So thank you, Baker Mayfield. Thumbs up. The truth. All right, Nick, get us into a little bit of a promo break here before we get into that match review. I know you have something you want to talk about.
Correct. Like I said last week, we now have a working promo code from Classic Football Shirts, so really excited about that. I mean, they've been really great to work with, and we have some other things coming down the road in terms of some giveaways and live events and things like that. So if you use the code LondonPod, much like you would for World Soccer Shop, that will get you 10% off at Classic Football Shirts. So go do that. And if you haven't been before, classicfootballshirts.co.uk, it is like a treasure trove of Chelsea and other types of shirts. I don't know why you'd want those, though. So go check it out and let us know what you'd buy.
All right, so time for the match review. The opponent, Fulham Football Club. It was in the Premier League, a West London derby at Stamford Bridge this Sunday, December 2nd, 2018. Final score was Blues 2, Fulham 0. Liam, we were talking before we started recording about the atmosphere and the hatred, quote unquote, that Fulham and their supporters have for the Chelsea faithful. Can you kind of walk us through maybe the atmosphere and throw some knowledge on those maybe who are not aware of the tension between the two sides?
Well, tension I think is maybe a little bit strong. It doesn't quite approach sort of Arsenal, Tottenham, or some of the bigger rivalries in the Premier League. I think it was probably the least needly of the 3 derbies on Derby Day. But it's always been a little bit of a one-sided rivalry. Fulham really dislike Chelsea. There's a fair bit of jealousy and envy thrown in based on the trajectories of the two clubs over the last 20 years or so. But Chelsea don't really care about Fulham. It's the same situation with QPR, really. And they're obviously much more preoccupied with Spurs and Arsenal and bigger fish. But in terms of the stadium, to be honest, it wasn't so much of a derby atmosphere. It was more just a standard Premier League atmosphere, really, where away fans are much better than home fans generally. So the atmosphere at Stamford Bridge from the home crowd isn't usually superb. I mean, if the team give them something to get excited about, then you get a bit of a noise. But generally, it's the away supporters that make the noise, and that's not just true of Stamford Bridge. That's true across the Premier League. But the Fulham fans today were chanting some not very nice things. Your support is, well, not very good, but using stronger words than I've used there. They were particularly targeting actually Marcos Alonso from the very first minute, which, referring to the car crash that he was involved in his time in Spain, as well as more footballing related insults. I've only really heard actually Tottenham fans refer to that incident with regards to Alonso before. It was the first time I'd heard Fulham really go for it, and I don't know whether that impacted Alonso at all. In the past, he's he's actually generally played better when he's been getting a hard time from fans. But he had an absolute shocker today. I think comprehensively the worst game of his Chelsea career. He couldn't do anything right. And so that was the up and short of it, really. I mean, the Fulham fans were in good voice, but Chelsea, and they got a bit of encouragement, I think, from their team at various times. But Chelsea always felt in control of the game, even if it didn't always seem that way. And as a result, it felt like a fairly routine Premier League win in the end.
Well, let's walk through that routine victory. And before we do that, we need to talk about the lineup. So, Nick, do you want to run us through what our starting 11 was?
Yes, I will, Dan. Thank you for asking. Kepa Arrizabalaga at the back. Rudiger, Alonso, Azpilicueta, Luiz, continuing to form our back four. Jorginho, Kanté, Kovacic in the middle. Hazard, Pedro, and Giroud. Pedro and Giroud getting rewarded for their good form, and that is good to know. Our substitutes were Willy, Caballero, Davide Zappacosta, Christensen, Fabregas, Ruben Loftus-Cheek, Willian, and Alvaro Morata.
All right, and just a couple quick stats. We did retain 66% of possession on the ball. We had 16 shots in total to Fulham's 9 shots on target to Fulham's 4. Got close to that 1,000 mark when it came to touches at 923. And funny enough, no offsides, even with Morata on the pitch this week. Was very exciting.
This has to be done. Just bravo, guys.
All right. Well, as Nick applauds us into the goals, we'll talk about one that happened really quick. 4th minute, Mike. Pedro assists from N'Golo Kanté, and what did you think about that little midfield magic that occurred?
I mean, beautiful interception at midfield and almost just a perfectly weighted pass to Pedro, who just does a great cut and smashes it home. You can't ask for a better goal than that, in my opinion. And, Kanté showing that he knows what to do with the ball once he gets it.
And it did take a little bit of time for our second goal to come through, Liam, but it was Ruben Loftus-Cheek assisted by Eden Hazard, the 82nd minute, and it was a pretty beautiful 1-2 work from them.
Yeah, it was really Sarri ball in action, I think. A really nice passage of one-touch passing involving 3 or 4 players, and fantastic awareness from Hazard to know that Loftus-Cheek was in prime shooting position. I mean, sometimes Hazard gets criticised for being a little bit too pass-happy in those situations, but that was a prime example of turning down a potentially good shot to get a great one. And Loftus-Cheek made no mistake. He's looking very confident in the last few weeks, and I think he's gaining some real momentum under Sarri now, and judging from what Sarri said about him afterwards, I think he believes that's the case as well.
Exciting times, and we will dive into Loftus-Cheek and where he's at within the pecking order in just a moment. But before that, Nick, last week we lost to Spurs and the party was over. Sorry ball, and Chelsea unbeaten streak was done. It was canceled. The season basically was scrapped. We shouldn't even consider watching. And then, the end of days are now over after the 2 wins that we've had, once against PAOK in midweek with Europa League, now winning against Fulham. What is what should our general feeling be now after this week of results, now heading into a week that ends with probably the biggest fixture remaining in the this part of the season at the end of December against City? What's your mood at, and how do you feel?
I think it was important on Thursday against PAOK that the team showed up and put in a shift. Not to recap that entire match, but it was kind of the perfect storm of they got an early red card and we're down to 10 men, and we had some a lot of rotation into the team, and a lot of players step up and prove why they should have a shot at starting in the Premier League. So that was a really good response to an abject performance against Spurs. Today's performance was a little less crisp in my mind, but still an important win. I mean, especially given the table as it stands, it's always important to beat teams that you should beat. So I feel okay. I mean, we're not going to win the league. That is pretty much determined at this point. So it's really important that we don't roll over against City. But at the end of the day, if we manage a draw or something, that would be pretty good. I mean, I think there is a gulf in class between City and the rest of the league, and that includes Liverpool and Chelsea and Spurs. Like, I think there's a different level. So I feel pretty good about Chelsea after the last two matches, but I look ahead and I see a team in City that is that should be favored to win all their matches. Mike, that's just how I feel about it.
Yeah, the way I look at it is if we get to the Christmas break and we say worst comes worst, we drop a match to City. If you were to tell me, when we were worrying about even just hiring a manager, that we would have 2 losses through the first half of the season, with Sarri only basically getting Jorginho as the player that he really wanted, I think we would not really have much to complain about. I think that, as far as class, we have a system that's still in the early process of being worked out and doesn't quite, in all honesty, probably have the players that we need or that Sarri wants. So I think we need to just, I think sometimes, we take those 3 points. We should be very happy with a win and just kind of move forward. And you know what? City's going to, City is one match in a season and we need to stay in top 4. And so far we're there. So I think, we need to just make sure that we're checking expectations and, taking a win for a win.
I think the risk is, just to say, I think there's a general need for perspective, isn't there?
Yeah.
Because the risk in all of this is that, and it's a very distinct possibility that City next week beat Chelsea and beat them, so badly that some people will be saying, that there's no way Sarri's system is fatally flawed. The Jorginho experiment isn't working. Chelsea will never reach that level, and I think we know going in that Chelsea are not in the same galaxy as City. No one else in the Premier League is really. I know Liverpool are keeping it close for now, but I think in time that will change. So while they may have to be the long-term benchmark, in the short term, I think you just have to, and this goes for the rest of the top 6 as well, not just Chelsea, judge yourself by, are we getting better? Not
right.
Are we closing the gap? Not are we closing back on City, because they're not catchable this season. It's not realistic.
Amen to that.
I couldn't agree more with that, Liam. I think one of the things that has come out of the last 2 matches, at least for me, and then I'll pass it back to Dan, has been Ruben Loftus-Cheek's confidence. I'm sure we're going to get into that in the next part, but even like taking that one specific example and expanding it out to the macro, if we start to see each individual player grow this year, make strides in their game, improve on last year's not only like big statistics like goals scored and passes and all that stuff, but mentality, then, and we make top 4 and we have a decent run in the FA Cup or something like that, then you know what? For this year, that'll do. And I will be, I'll be the first one at the end of the season pod to proclaim that it was a success. So there you go, Dan.
Yeah, I think it's identifying, as you're talking about, Nick, the individual benchmarks that would define a successful season. I think we should never give up on the dream of potentially something happening at City that, maybe Pep starts growing hair and it just sucks away all of his power and he can no longer manage in the game of football anymore. And I don't know what would have to happen for them to be brought down to the level of mortals. They've kind of ascended to demigods at this point. And if that were to happen, I think we want to, obviously be as close as possible within striking distance. Obviously, with the results today, Arsenal, Spurs, us, are kind of hovering in the 3-4 spot. Liverpool is just a little bit ahead after a wonky goal in the 2-speed. And then we have City, who's just a little level above. But I think looking at the matriculation of Ruben Loftus-Cheek into being a starting player for Chelsea, seeing Callum Hudson-Odoi re-sign for Chelsea and find a way to be a rotational winger for us, as we saw him play not only on the left but the right side against PAOK, which we kind of have talked about the fact that maybe or maybe not, could he play on that side? So I think what are the things or the smaller things that we as fans are going to look to and help define success beyond winning the Premier League? And I think those would be winning FA Cup, Europa League, and also the League Cup, and then what happens with certain players. But I know that we talked about Ruben Loftus-Cheek specifically, and Liam, he probably wouldn't have made the bench today potentially if Barkley had been declared fit, but he certainly took advantage of his time on the pitch, scoring the insurance goal, and definitely looking ready to give Sarri more lineup headaches. What was your assessment of his cameo today?
Yeah, I totally agree. I thought he was very impressive. I thought he was one of Chelsea's most impressive performers against PAOK as well. Very unlucky not to score, but he brings, I think, a power and a speed and a directness to that more advanced midfield role than I think anyone else that Sarri has to choose from. And as he grows in confidence, as he improves in what Sarri calls the tactical element, as Sarri feels that he can trust him a little bit more, I think it's set up for him in terms of his ability to take that shirt for his own. I think he's got a really good chance to see off Ross Barkley and Mateo Kovacic to be that third midfield starter, because I've been watching Loftus-Cheek for years, and I think now we're finally seeing him producing the kind of performances, all-round performances that he was producing against teenagers at youth level, where he's just all-round dominant. He manages the game. He can pass sideways and keep the ball, but he can also go vertical and carry it at speed and really, just be like a runaway train. And now he's doing that against men, and I think that's the really encouraging thing. It's been a very long and winding road to get here, and it didn't always seem certain that we would. But I am increasingly confident that Loftus-Cheek is now becoming the player that a lot of people always thought he could be, and if he really does deliver on that promise, then I think there's no reason why he can't become a very important player for Chelsea this season, and we're talking about weeks rather than months until that happens.
Nick, I think there was a good comment here from Opta Joe, part of the Opta Stats Network, indicating that Loftus-Cheek has scored 5 goals in his last 6 games across all competitions, one more than he netted in his first 60 appearances in his professional club career, which was a total of 4 goals. How are you feeling? Do you kind of echo Liam's sentiments about where you see Loftus-Cheek right now?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think, doing it against PAOK and doing it against Fulham or doing it against City even are, those are different things, right? So I think we have to kind of put that into perspective. But I think of all of our midfielders, and, I'd throw N'Golo Kante in there too. Ruben, I think this system is best suited for his skill set more than any other system he's probably played in at Chelsea. I think he knows that he has license to carry the ball. I think he has license to interchange at a higher level and even swap with wings should they decide to drive in. I think he knows where to cover defensively, even though he's still growing into the tactical part of his game plan, and Sarri's game plan, I should say. He looks confident. He's clearly a absolute monster to deal with for an opposing, back line. I mean, he's as physical as any Chelsea player we have, including Rudiger. But now it's becoming clear to me that the thing that I think we all worried about, Mike, was the mental side of his game. Does he have the ability to, shrug off competition and take a bit of the game for himself and make that his own? And I think he's beginning to show glimpses that he's able to do that.
Yeah, and speaking from a mental aspect, as a player, if you're not starting, that can be tough. But if you have that, I applaud Sarri, because what he's created from, Ross and Ruben is he has these guys who are coming in with 20, 25 minutes to play who are hungry, especially in sometimes matches that some of our starters might not be most enthused to play in. And these guys are coming in, they're making an impact, and they're getting goals. And I think, when you're looking at, as a player, it's basically a closing role. He's a closer, right? And it doesn't matter that you didn't get the whole game, but if you can come in and make that impact and you can get goals to your name, it's just a next level of confidence. And I think it's really a brilliant masterstroke. And I think these guys showing that they want to play, especially against competition that's not going to be the easiest. And just because it's a lesser team doesn't mean those guys aren't there to make a career for themselves as well. I think overall it's working out really well. And I think we've got that nice kind of stable of guys who are looking out to impress the coach. And I think Ruben has figured out what he needs to do to get a shot at the starting lineup. And I think that will help him work even harder going forward.
Yeah, it's been really nice to see the emergence and then also the trust. I know, Liam, you had a chance to ask Sarri about it in the post-match press conference, but he was making reference to the fact that tactically it was his best game of the season, or the one against PAOK, and that he has no doubt that the impact will become clear once, they had no doubt in the impact that Loftus-Cheek was going to make, once he subbed him in for Kovacic, who definitely looked a little leggy today, a little tired, and definitely took a couple of nasty challenges that somehow were not whistled or observed by the officiator. So, how do you feel, or what was your sense of the kind of the way those words kind of came from Sarri? Because obviously there's the written form of it, but there's also the inflection and the intention. How do you feel about Sarri's relationship or his admiration maybe for the way that Loftus-Cheek is picking up the game or picking up Sarri ball?
Well, he was smiling as he said it. So I think that can only be a good sign. I think Sarri is taking pride in... He's always been a guy who takes pride in improving players. This is central to the way he thinks about football. This is why he has such disdain for the transfer market, because he thinks the way to build winning teams is on the training pitch. I think he took a lot of pride in the strides that Ross Barkley made in the opening weeks of the season because of the work that had been done with him in pre-season. And I think now he is relishing the fact that Loftus-Cheek is coming on leaps and bounds as well, because he's had less time to work with him. And so it makes sense that the process might have taken a little bit longer. But Loftus-Cheek, I think, has really, he's taken everything in the right spirit. It would be very easy for him, given his journey over the last 4 years, and he has been messed about for a lot of that time, to be really disillusioned by coming back, not getting opportunities straight away under Sarri after playing pretty much a season of Premier League football at Palace, and really having to prove himself all over again. But that's exactly the mentality with which he's approached it. He's knuckled down. He's listened. I've seen Sarri coaching him one-on-one in games. And it's always constructive with him, even when he's brutally honest. Sarri, it's generally for the purpose of improving a player rather than knocking them down.
But whoever could you be referring to with that?
Well, exactly. Complete that sentence in your own head. But yeah, I mean, he always seems to be wanting to find ways to improve players, and I think he's really getting something out of Loftus-Cheek, and we're beginning to see the player he could be. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what any of us think about how Loftus-Cheek is playing, because Sarri is the one that sees him every day in training. Sarri is the one that has to pick the team and pick the bench every 3 days. And I think it's hugely encouraging for Loftus-Cheek that Sarri seems to be now developing a real trust in him. And Sarri doesn't trust easily. We've seen at previous clubs, he's got a core of about 14, 15 players that he really relies upon. And there are already signs that could be a problem for him at Chelsea with some of the more fringe guys. But if Loftus-Cheek can find himself within that chosen group, then he could do really, really well.
I mean, it's the dream scenario that we have academy players graduate, make their way into the first team, potentially as a squad or even a starting player. And then when we do need to dip into the transfer market for positions that we'll get to in part 2, which will be a lot of questions about, that you can spend more on the positions you need because you've grown some talent locally that you can now take advantage of on the pitch. We did get a couple questions One from William on our Patreon and the other from W_Landme on Twitter asking, surely Ruben has to start now. Nick, I think rotationally he's going to get the opportunity to start pretty regularly as the fixtures come in hot and heavy for the remainder of the month.
I would like to. I think it would be great to see him in there. He does offer the ability, I think, more than Barkley, more than Conte, more than Kovacic. Kovacic and him are actually probably pretty close in the fact they carry the ball forward, but I think Ruben offers more in terms of attack, whereas Kovacic is definitely more defensively sound. So yeah, I would like him to see him rotated in there. It's kind of weird though, Mike, because we have this recency bias for almost all of our players, right? Every week we talk about Ross Barkley having 3 great matches in a row and how he should start, and then N'Golo Kante's not playing in the right position and he should replace Jorginho, who should never play for Chelsea again, and then it's like all on and on and on. And I think it's just it is kind of a dream scenario. You'd hope there is more consistency, but it's a dream scenario to have all these players competing for spots and legitimately competing.
Yeah, well, and I think we're at a point in which when we're making that substitution, be it, Ruben coming in for Mateo, our game changes. We go from more heavily, a little bit more defense, maybe more possession based, and we have that attacking aspect that we haven't had. So, you're bringing on a 6'3", 6'4" powerful player who knows how to attack goal, who's changing completely how that side's playing. And I think that's very difficult for, defenders or midfielders who've already been running for 65, 70 minutes to attempt to mark that. You know what I mean? So I think the answer is sometimes the substitutions coming against heavy legs and bringing a new look, that's what works best for us. It's a new spark. We're seeing substitutions mean something and have time to make a change. So I think it's kind of, I think it's hard to determine who should start. I think as long as we have good rotation throughout the match, I think we'll be okay. And I think the players will be okay with that as well too.
So opening the door then, Mike, we kind of obviously had a very generally happy vibe up until this point. We won the game, got 3 points, climbed back into third position on the table. But there were concerns with the defensive performances, and Sarri saw it too, talking about substitutions, and actually bringing Alonso off the pitch, putting Zappacosta on, who went to the right back role, as Azpilicueta went to the left. What did you see? And obviously Liam mentioned it as well, that this might have been one of Alonso's worst performances in a Chelsea shirt against the worst side, at least table-wise, in the Premier League this season.
I'm going to be very pragmatic about this. And if you tell me that the worst performance that Alonso's had in a Chelsea kit is going to be a 2-0 win, I'll take that. I know it's not great. But everybody has an off day. I mean, there's a reason why there's 3 substitutes to use, right? So if you're not having a great day, you don't necessarily want to use it on a defender, but sometimes you need to switch it up. And who knows, it could be stomach bug. It could be any number of things. The defense as a whole, it's difficult, right? And I think the problem and the harping that we're having on our back four is that people are doing the whole what if. Well, if we just hadn't given up this goal, then we would, they're doing all the point shaving of, well, we would be, in second place if we just hadn't done this, or, you know what I mean? And I think it's very difficult, and I have high expectations for our back four as well. But, this is the system that we're playing. Players have limitations, and, I think personally, not to go too much into this next segment, but I think when it comes to signing new players, maybe we get a defender, but maybe we have more offensive spark and play a little bit more defense by, being more I'm losing my words, scoring more, doing more with 60, 70% possession and finishing. So again, I think it's a tough situation. I don't think that getting rid of all of them is the answer, but I think tactically we'll see some changes. I don't know. The formations might change, but I wasn't terribly unhappy, and I'm sure that won't be a popular opinion.
I mean, so Liam, you saw it at the ground, and obviously talked about the chants that you were hearing as well. What were you seeing maybe differently from Alonso in this match versus the past couple that he's put out from a performance standpoint?
Well, I mean, I think we've all seen fairly consistently Alonso have dodgy moments defensively, either on the ball, or if he's being run at one-on-one, or simply just getting caught too far upfield and teams attacking the space he leaves. But what I hadn't seen too much is him be so bad on the ball going forward. Alonso's great strength is that he's such a big weapon for Chelsea in the opposition half. He uses it intelligently. He's a good crosser most of the time. He actually picks people out rather than just swinging the ball into an area. And he's got this uncanny ability to put himself in the right position in the penalty area to score goals, whether it be from set pieces or open play. So that's usually his big strength, but it was a huge weakness today. It looked for a little while as if him and Cyrus Christie, the Fulham right back, were having a competition as to who could give the ball away more frequently and in more different ways. They were both awful, but it can, as we said, it can happen to any player. And Alonso really hasn't had many days like that. He's had far more good days for Chelsea in an attacking sense than games like that. It might just have been fatigue. I think he's been one of the players that Sarri has rotated the least, and it's definitely annoyed Emerson not to get more opportunities than he has already. And I would kind of be surprised, given the context, if Emerson didn't get to start against Wolves now, because otherwise you're asking Alonso to play 3 games in a week, where clearly in the first game of that stretch he's looked like something is affecting him. So you'd probably want to give him a little bit of a rest. But it was a bad day for him today, but I don't think it was any more than that.
It would definitely be important to get that rest before going up against a red-hot Raheem Sterling on the right-hand side, or whatever they want to do creatively to flip around, maybe Sané if they want to have some fun or just be unpredictable. But Nick, when we saw Zappacosta come in for Alonso, he went to the right, and then Azpilicueta goes over to the left. Like, how did you feel about the defense after that? I felt like it looked more solidified. I felt like Azpilicueta actually looked a little bit more comfortable in that left back side, kind of playing with Hazard. What did you see, or did you feel the same way?
I was a little surprised, to be honest with you, because positionally you just would have thought that Emerson would have come on, given that he's played there when Alonso's been out or in cup matches. So it was a little surprising, but I think it's also a chance for Sarri to see, how Dave does in a left back role, much like he did under Mourinho the second time around. So it'll be interesting to see if that's a tactic against City, because even though I think we can all admit Azpilicueta is not having his best defending year of his career, he's still an incredible one-on-one defender, and if that's maybe a tactic that he wants to, if Sarri wants to throw at Pep to maybe counterbalance against a Raheem Sterling or a Riyad Mahrez or someone of that ilk.
Yeah, I also go ahead, Mike.
I was just quickly going to say, I also think it's really important for Sarri, while we're talking about trust, get to see Zappacosta play Premier League competition on the right, because injuries happen, and I think that's important to see how he looks on that side as well, if Dave happens to go down or needs a rest.
And the last thing on this is I did enjoy one of our listeners, JL_Hines on Twitter, shooting us a little tweet asking if Alonso forgot to drink his secret stuff in reference to Space Jam, where Bugs Bunny gives the Michael's secret stuff to the team so that they can beat the Monstars. Nice little pop culture reference. Greatly appreciated. But that kind of ends our match recap. I want to see, does anyone else have any additional final thoughts? The one I'll lead with is Jorginho having a little bit of a bounce back game. Our friend Nazar obviously putting out some of the stats there. He had 87 passes, most possession regained, 11, and then interceptions, 3 on the day. Looked a little bit more confident, looked a little bit more kind of in the right positions, and obviously players were being directed appropriately, and he wasn't getting pressed as much. So that gave him a little opportunity to bounce back in. But Nick, anything else you want to talk about from the match?
I didn't think David Luiz had a particularly good game again. And you know, we can all realize that, you know, it's just a game. It's a game that we won, but something that it continues to be a worry for me as we think about City and at the end of next weekend. So I'm going to be curious to see what Maurizio does with the back line, because on current form, I think City would kind of eat our back line alive. So just throwing that out there. Maybe the Dave to the left side is there to help protect David Luiz's crazier instincts.
Mike, what about you?
Yeah, in that same vein, I was going to say, I don't think after this match that Kepa or Rudiger are going to get the credit that they deserve for keeping this, keeping the clean sheet and, making sure that we get all 3 points. I think both of them had some fantastic saves. And Nick, you're right. Rudiger had to cover for both Luiz and Dave a couple times, and that's just not going to work against City, because they're going to have the people in those spaces to take advantage. So hopefully we can shore it up, get some good reps in with Wolves.
All right. And Liam, anything else from the match that you observed that we did not touch on here?
Well, one thing that struck me with the first goal was that obviously some people have been suggesting that Kante should play at the base of midfield where Jorginho currently is. And one thing to say about that is that it's fundamentally pointless, because Sarri is not going to consider anything that doesn't have Jorginho at the base of that midfield. It's the foundational pillar of his system. But the other thing is that if Kante were playing at the base of midfield, which is a position he hasn't actually played that much in his career in England, so he would have to learn it, then he wouldn't have actually been very well placed to make a play like that, to dispossess someone like Seri in the Fulham half, and then drive with the ball at the defence and pick out the right pass. That's obviously something he's still getting better at, but he did it brilliantly in the first few minutes of the game, and I think he can be absolutely devastating in a high pressing system, because he's so good at cutting off the angles for players and then winning the ball off them cleanly. So I think that can be a big weapon for Chelsea. I'm not saying that people who want him to play at the base of midfield are wrong necessarily. It's just that there are tactical trade-offs to every decision you make. And if you move Kante deeper in the Chelsea midfield, then you lose some of what he can offer as a destructive force further forward.
It's almost as if, Liam, that's the way it was supposed to work all along. And this was just one almost. And this was just a rare opportunity in which Fulham were terrible in the middle of the field. Basically all their attacks came down the wings of any value. That in a moment like that, N'Golo Kante is going to have a field day, because there were a ton of sloppy passes, and midfielders for Fulham were not ready for how amazing he is at tracking down and winning the ball back. And I think the most impressive part of that play for me was the perfectly weighted ball to Pedro, who, if he gets the ball in that position, Pedro is lethal. When he has to create for, I think a ton for himself, maybe he gets a little overambitious and puts it in the, 80th row. But I thought it was just a really excellent clapback at the haters from last week.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see, and I don't know if the stat is out there, so if someone wants to point us to it, is like time between pass. As I think we've talked about how Sarri ball is about quick passes, not holding onto the ball long, moving the ball forward or recycling it appropriately. And it felt like just on eye test today that we were doing a much better job of recycling and then also moving the ball quicker between all players. And I think we've highlighted Kante and Azpilicueta the past couple of weeks is struggling with that. And today, at least with Kante, you felt that he was moving that ball a little bit quicker. So as we talked about Sarri's ability to coach up, I think is another good example of that in the match today. But we did run a man of the match poll, and we did get basically no flack this week for it. We had 4 options. We had N'Golo Kante winning with 40% of the vote, Kepa with 37%, Loftus-Cheek with 20%, Azpilicueta with 3%. I think the only shout, Nick, was potentially Pedro being included in this poll as well. But you know what? Kante and Kepa were so great. Was he really going to get even more than a few percent? I would say
no. This was the right call. I applaud our voters for doing the right thing here. I thought N'Golo played a great game, not only getting the assist, but just generally bossing the midfield. And it was great to see again. Quality win. I think it was a little bit of a boring game overall, if we are honest. I mean, there was some moments of excitement, but it wasn't kind of the North London derby type of thriller type of match. But in May, when they count up the points, they don't actually, Liam, I'm not sure if you know this, they don't actually include how stylistic you are when they count up the points. So a quality win is a quality win in my mind.
Do they not?
No. Breaking news. I know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you have sources to confirm this, Nick?
It's not a beauty pageant, Nick. That's what you're saying.
It's just a quality win. I know that I saw some stuff on Twitter about how 2-0 didn't really wow me, and I think that was partly because people were cranky from waking up at 6 a.m. or 4 a.m. and in your cases out west. But this was a good win, a bounce back win. Pile on the momentum against Wolves and do your best against City and see where the chips fall after that. I think it was a building block.
All right, so let's take a look at the league table as it stands. Manchester City, no surprise, in first place at 38 points. Liverpool, somehow, with the magic of a 96-minute goal, win and retain the second position on 36 points. We move up on the victory to 31 points in third place. Arsenal, after smashing Tottenham, who looked completely different than the Tottenham we played last week. We have to get some genetic testing to ensure that they are actually the Tottenham we played last week. Are on 30 points, but with a better goal difference than Tottenham, who are now in fifth position. And then you start to see a little bit of a separation, 8 points between fifth position and then the 6th and 7th. Everton remain in 6th position. Manchester United in 7th. Leicester chomping at their heels, though, on 21 points, and Bournemouth and 20 just ahead of Watford with a better goal difference on the 9 and 10 spot. And your bottom 3 remain Southampton, who managed a draw versus United, a 2-2, in 18th place. Burnley keep on going down into the 19th position, and Fulham retain a stranglehold on the 20th spot. So Not too much changing right now. Actually, I would say some of it's starting to settle a little bit within the table. So, I think we're going to see maybe some more movement, though, as the fixtures come pretty quickly, resuming Tuesday here. And it'll be fun, Mike.
Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to it. It's a great time of the year. I spent this weekend doing a bunch of Christmas stuff. And to be honest, I'm just looking forward to being in London in what? 20 days, 25 days, something like that.
Yeah.
Hey, Liam, we're coming back. You know that, right?
Yeah. Woo.
I'd heard on the grapevine.
Dramatic pause for effect.
a dramatic unmuting for effect.
Yeah. No, we're looking forward to getting to meet up with you again and, enjoy a holiday beer or two and some of the cheer when you're not probably getting some early grays from the many games that you'll be attending and the many miles that you'll be traveling to record hopefully many Chelsea wins over the season. So we appreciate you making some time with us this week to cover the match. And do you have any final thoughts though before we let you go?
I think just that it's quite important for Chelsea and for Sarri to make sure they get a positive result against Wolves, because if they win that game, I think it becomes easier to go into the City game knowing that even if you lose and lose quite badly, you can kind of brush it off and continue with your season. Whereas if they drop points against Wolves, who themselves have been really poor recently, I think they've just lost to the two worst teams in the division in Cardiff and Huddersfield. If you drop points away to them, then the context of that City game changes, I think. And if you lose there, then people can start drawing different conclusions about where the Chelsea might be going under Sarri, or at least making different arguments. So the Wolves game's important. I'm sure they know that, and we'll see how it goes on Wednesday.
Absolutely. Well, Nick, any final thoughts from you?
No, if you don't follow Liam on Twitter, he's one of our favorite follows. We retweet him a lot. Liam, just hit him with your Twitter handle again, so the good folks can follow you if they're not already.
It's Liam_Toomey, and Toomey is an impossible Irish name, so it's TWOMEY.
Mike, any final thoughts?
I'm, just happy to see 3 points, especially waking up as early as we did. That's sometimes all I want.
Yeah, I think I'll end with the final thought, and both to Chelsea and the Premier League clubs as a whole for the Rainbow Laces campaign, just continuing to do some great work to spread awareness to fan groups or fans and supporters that may be marginalized or may have struggled to enjoy the game as fairly and as equally represented as other groups of individuals. So nice work continuing that for another season, and good by the club. They did a really nice video with Tracy Brown and Graham Lasso, and Graham Lasso is now the patron to the Chelsea Pride, the supporters group that within the supporters that focuses on the representation of LGBTQ fans. So great work with that. And that is it. We are done with this episode. We will hit you back tomorrow, depending upon when you're listening, or it might just be right next in your feed, with an episode looking ahead to the match against Wolves, answering your social media questions. And we're going to be doing a lot of pods, so keep up. And you know what? Also, keep the blue flag flying high.